So the ETF for Ethereum has officially been live for about 36 hours, and we're already seeing a lot of inflows that are coming, just not at the record rate that we thought it was going to be, potentially based on a lot of presumptions of how much Bitcoin flew in the first day, and looking at some other potential altcoins that are looking like they're going to be listed, with a huge push for Solana coming. However, it's quite impressive with over $1 billion of volume coming through. So I'll keep you updated on what's going on with that. But right now it looks like Ethereum right now is off to a little bit of a slower start, but we are seeing some real possible momentum coming in from other firms being added. And I think the price overall is going to just be an indication of how much volume and how much interest are in with Ethereum. And of course, I think that's going to bring in a lot of different unique altcoins, we'll call them, beyond Solana, and things that are going to be coming through with the current regulatory environment, which is interesting considering this is an election year and there's a lot of things that are sort of up in the air and unknown at this point. So hang on, it's going to be a wild ride. Now that I've covered that, I wanted to get into what we talked about in the last video, which is the CrowdStrike incident and how DePIN, or having decentralized blockchains, can actually help solve a lot of these problems. And there's a lot of real world use cases where DePIN, or decentralized physical infrastructure networks, can really solve real world problems, most of all being redundancy, reliability, and security, which is extremely important, especially when we're talking about first responders. We're talking about hospitals, EMTs. Those are just a few of the real life, real world safety concerns that people have when a specific network can go down and shut down hospital care, life-saving care, all those kinds of things. So there's real world scenarios where DePIN can really come into place. And today I want to cover briefly an article where there's something very interesting where law enforcement could really come into play here. And basically there's a lot of interesting ideas, and these can translate to different industries and different things that we use all the time as a nation. But let me get right into it. So capital firm Z Prime Capital suggests that decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePIN, have the potential to transform law enforcement. These networks could shift law enforcement from state-controlled, centralized structures to community-based enterprises, thereby maximizing transparency. So transparency also is a big one, let alone the security and the uptime and redundancy, if you will. But having a transparency layer, especially on the blockchain, would make a lot of people feel better, and it would also reduce a lot of crimes, hate crimes. Almost would potentially reduce the need for body cams, but we'll get into that later. So decentralized security, or DSEC, is a nascent subsector of distributed infrastructure that involves building distributed surveillance and law enforcement architecture like ballistic triangulation systems, radar arrays, and community patrol decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. According to this article, these, as I mentioned, put in a lot of redundancies in place, and it gives you tools that you can do to, say, track down an assassin, triangulate different objects that they're using to try to harm someone, things like that, which is obviously very relevant as of what's happened recently. So right now, this is more covering, we'll call them government-based infrastructures, but there's a lot of infrastructure and there's a lot of use cases for individuals like you and me. And it's saying while consumer-facing retail applications typically try to avoid such robust security measures due to the increased costs of security redundancies, communities and organizations that prize security above all else will gladly pay the extra dollar to ensure that they're leveraging the best security money can buy. DSEC applications also go far beyond community policing or decentralizing law enforcement. Decentralized security architecture provides real, novel incentives for local communities to reinforce the existing electrical infrastructure, shielding it from highly disruptive events such as coronal mass ejections from the sun, or EMPs, which is electromagnetic pulse weapons, while outsourcing the costs to participants in the DePIN network. So if everyone's running a node, I'm running a node, you're running a node, your neighbor's running a node, we can actually make these things far more secure, and we can basically have a first line of defense for the dreaded EMP or a solar flare, something that very realistically could happen in the next week, month, year to come. So this is very interesting. You could also use a decentralized network of aerial radar, which could spot an aerial incursion from unauthorized Also, a decentralized network of aerial radar could spot aerial incursions from unauthorized aircrafts or small reconnaissance drones, reducing the potential for terrorism. So, decentralized networks might be the antidote to authoritarianism. The development of public blockchain currencies and decentralized infrastructure did not occur in a vacuum, but is the most natural response to a growing threat of state surveillance, failing centralized power structures, and a growing threat of authoritarianism across the globe. So, obviously, the most recent example that's going on as of filming this is there's Congress, and there is a lot of high-powered people within the government that are trying to get to the bottom of what happened with the recent assassination attempt of President Trump. And because there's no transparency and because there's no networks in place for citizens to monitor these different things that are happening, even though most of the public's already smart and has basically found a lot of how this could have been stopped, and it's just a failure of communication. But think about if everyone had access to the same information and could be monitored on the blockchain, we wouldn't have to be answering these questions, swearing people under oath, and people that have a different incentive structure, like trying to keep their job within the government, wouldn't be trying to hide certain aspects of the case. And as a lot of people already know, the government tends to preserve themselves over the people that they're sworn to protect. Another prime example of this is increased social media censorship and surveillance efforts against activists through the collusion of government and big tech to stifle protests, silence dissenting voices, and censor misinformation, quote unquote, a trend that accelerated during COVID. A decentralized physical infrastructure network such as Helium's network and other decentralized internet providers could remedy this problem by removing a power from a central internet service providers and big tech companies, ensuring a free and open internet for all. So imagine that. If you have your own decentralized internet that you have access to, a mobile network, a internet network, anything like that, that can't be censored and can't be stopped because it's not regulated, it's not going through the centralized authority and regime, and it can't be monitored, people can say what they want, there's a lot more freedom, there's a lot more security, and there's a lot more transparency, and the people can't handle these problems better than these agencies that claim that they know better than us and that they can do things better than us, which they clearly have proven that they cannot. But with that, there also is a trade-off, right? So while increased transparency is beneficial, and in my opinion, the most important, it often comes at the cost of reduced privacy. Basically, addressing the challenge of balancing transparency with privacy and caution against the potential danger of creating an even more intrusive mass surveillance state. So this is a fair point. Privacy is a superpower. What you can do, what you can't do, how you conduct yourself, what other people know about you, it's almost essential to security. At the same time, you would have the option to opt in or opt out. It's like right now, everyone that checks the box for terms of service, if they want to use like Facebook or Instagram, most people know that they're being surveilled and that they're giving away their freedom of privacy and they're giving away all this access because they find the benefit of doing that to interact with their friends online outweighs their own security, their own privacy, and so on and so forth. But with that, you don't have an option, right? You either check the box of terms of service and give away all your freedoms and all your privacy. But what if you had a way where if you wanted to connect and give personal information or private information on a network, like a decentralized social media, you would be able to get paid by giving your name, by giving your gender, your preferences, all of these things, so that advertisers could actually pay you for the information that they're already stealing and getting for free. Interesting idea. The other part of this is looking at the survival of our species. We actually have to have the ability to speak outrageous thoughts and revolt against tyranny. If the asymmetry between enforcement and capacity to revolt becomes too big, we're just enabling a minority report like tyranny, just like in that movie. So there's a lot of considerations that we need to look at here. Law enforcement is an interesting one because, you know, like you said, there's trade-offs, but you would have the power to opt in. You would have the power to share your information, to share what devices you're using. You're not coerced or you're not forced to do this. At the same time, if everything's a lot more transparent without getting to specifics, kind of like how Bitcoin addresses are like pseudonymous on the blockchain, yeah, people can track them down, but it's not apparent necessarily, and you can have anonymity and you can have other ways of utilizing these networks and having a level of transparency without getting very specific and violating any one individual's rights. So like you said, there's a trade-off. I definitely am against the system as it is now, but if you give other people options where they feel like they're in control, and if you want to do something, if you want to provide your information to gain access to public information or to gain access to feeling more secure in your community, at your hospitals, at your banks, or your whatever, you can basically just do that and know the risks that you're doing before you do it. Whereas right now, you don't know the risks and there's no transparency. Everyone's trying to find out the truth. So wanted to come on here and kind of go over what some of the different, I guess we'll call them trade-offs are for doing this, but DePIN is a use case for blockchain technology is one of the most interesting, especially when we're looking at potentially a third world war. We're looking at surveillance systems, we're looking at missile systems, weapon systems. Having a decentralized network or an infrastructure would make sure that there's no single point of failure like an EMP that would take out half the world, all the banks and everything that relies on them. If everyone runs a node and is incentivized to decentralize all this information by running your own node and contributing to the network all over the world or all over the nation, it actually would be a lot more secure. What people have to realize is, what would you rather have? Would you rather have something that's cheaper but centralized, or would you rather have something that's decentralized, maybe a little bit slower, but ultimately more secure? There's no right answer to this, but for me, being a privacy and sovereign focused individual, I would like to have the option, because in some cases it might be better to have a cheaper, faster, more centralized system if it doesn't affect the privacy or the rights of an individual. At the same time, when we're talking about public service and we're talking about anything that comes from ambulances and police networks and radars or even the TSA, I mean, right now you have no choice but to go through their protocols and you're subject to the whim of whatever they want. However, at the same time, if you have another option and you have a way to opt out and gather the information you need to feel secure without knowing the very specifics or private rights of an individual, I think it could really bolster in a new revolution, because I think overall I would choose decentralization as a security measure over the efficiency of trusting a centralized system or a centralized entity, network, etc. So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. I mean, I can see both sides of it from a logical standpoint, but it all comes down to what's more valuable to you, what's more important to you. Is it your own privacy? Is it your own freedom? Is it your own security? Because it's for the people, by the people? Or do we want to continue to do this legacy system where everyone's just kind of trusting the government and hoping for the best? So I'll let you guys kind of think about that. Let me know in the comments what you think. And also, click on this video right here where we went over CrowdStrike the other day and check it out. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Crypto Renegade out.